Commander Elena Rodriguez stood before the Galactic Assembly, her heart steady despite the 200 alien representatives, focusing their varied sensory organs upon her. The vast chamber, designed to accommodate beings from every known spacefaring civilization, hummed with environmental systems maintaining dozens of different atmospheric bubbles. The Assembly had convened this emergency session after their routine scan of the human delegation revealed what they considered impossible readings. Honorable representatives. Elena began, her words automatically translated into 67 different languages. I understand your concern, but I assure you that the readings are correct. Every human on our ship maintains similar radiation levels. High Chancellor Zixix, their crystalline form refracting light in patterns of distress, leaned forward. Commander Rodriguez, you expect us to believe that your entire species lives with radiation levels that would kill most sentient beings. That you not only survive but thrive in conditions we consider lethal. Elena allowed herself a small smile. First contact scenarios had been rehearsed countless times on Earth, but nobody had predicted this particular complication. Chancellor, what you consider lethal radiation is simply background noise to us. Our planet's history shaped us differently than most species in the Assembly. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of translated exclamations. Representative Catal of the Void Dwellers, their vacuum-suited form hovering above their platform, raised an appendage for attention. Explain how any species could evolve to survive such conditions. Our studies show it should be impossible. Elena activated the holographic display she had prepared, showing Earth's geological timeline. Our world experienced several mass extinction events, including periods of intense radiation. Rather than dying out, our ancestors adapted. Each generation became more resilient, developing cellular repair mechanisms far more sophisticated than initially thought possible. The image shifted to show human DNA, highlighting the unique repair sequences that had so shocked the Assembly scientists. What you see as a lethal environment, we see as normal. Every human child is born with these repair mechanisms active. We didn't even realize how unusual this was until we began comparing our biology to other spacefaring species. This is unprecedented, declared Science Minister Venn, their gelatinous form rippling with excitement. No known species has achieved this level of radiation resistance. The implications for space exploration alone are staggering. Elena nodded, remembering the first time Earth scientists had realized how their radiation tolerance compared to galactic standards. We've already begun exploring cooperation possibilities. There are countless damaged worlds that our species could help rehabilitate, zones considered too dangerous for conventional cleanup that we could safely enter. The assembly chamber fell into contemplative silence, broken only by the soft whir of environmental systems. Elena could almost see the calculations happening behind alien eyes and sensory organs, the strategic value of a species that could walk unprotected through radiation zones, the potential threats and opportunities this presented. Chancellor Zixix's crystalline form shifted, creating a harmonic tone that the translators interpreted as thoughtful concern. Commander, while the potential benefits are clear, you must understand our hesitation. Your species essentially carries within it what we consider a deadly force. How can we be certain this gift won't be used as a weapon? Elena had expected this question. She straightened, meeting the Chancellor's geometric sensory patterns directly. Because we understand better than most the devastating power of radiation. Our history includes tragic examples of its misuse. We've learned those lessons at great cost. Our ability isn't a weapon. It's a responsibility. We see it as our duty to help prevent others from suffering radiation's worst effects. The chamber hummed with discussion as representatives consulted with their governments back home. Elena waited patiently, knowing this moment would define humanity's place in the galactic community. Finally, Minister Venn spoke again, their translucent form glowing with bioluminescent patterns of decision. The Science Council proposes an immediate joint research initiative. If humans truly wish to use their unique adaptation to benefit others, we should begin with proper scientific documentation and controlled studies. The emergency alert pierced through the habitation ring of Stellar Station 7, its harsh tone cutting across 60 different atmospheric bubbles. Commander Elena Rodriguez was in the middle of a conference with Science Minister Venn when the station's AI interrupted with dire news. The Helios Research Facility, home to the galaxy's most advanced radiation studies, had suffered a catastrophic containment failure. Multiple breaches detected in primary and secondary containment, the AI reported, its neutral tone contrasting with the gravity of the situation. Radiation levels in affected sectors exceed survival parameters for all known species. All known species except one. Elena exchanged glances with Minister Venn, whose gelatinous form had paled to an almost transparent state. The Helios facility housed over 3,000 researchers from across the galaxy, and while emergency protocols would have sealed off the affected areas, anyone trapped inside would be facing certain death by conventional standards. How many? Elena asked, already reaching for her emergency communicator. 273 life signs detected in compromised sectors. The AI responded. Environmental systems failing. Estimated survival time without intervention, 43 minutes. Minister Venn's translation crystal vibrated with distress. The nearest evacuation fleet is 3 hours away. Even with our fastest ships, we cannot. You can't, Elena interrupted, already sending emergency codes to the human contingent on the station. But we can. Lieutenant Park, status of the Human Emergency Response Team. Suited up and ready, Commander, came the immediate response. We've got 15 volunteers standing by. The station's emergency council chamber erupted in protests as Elena outlined her plan. Representative Cuttle's vacuum suit vented excess gas in agitation. You cannot be serious. Even with your species' unusual tolerance, the radiation levels in there are within our survivable range. Elena finished firmly. Especially with our protective gear. We've trained for this exact scenario. She turned to address the gathered council directly. Every minute we spend debating is a minute those researchers don't have. High Chancellor Zixix's crystalline form resonated with decision patterns. The risk to your people is accepted. Elena cut in. This is why we're here. This is what we offered to the assembly. She gestured to the emergency displays, showing the spreading radiation zones. We can argue about protocols later. Right now, there are people dying who don't need to die. The silence that followed was broken only by the continuing alert tones. Finally, Minister Venn's translation crystal pulsed with approval. Go. The Science Council accepts full responsibility for any consequences. Elena was moving before the words finished translating. The Human Emergency Response Team had already prepped the specialized rescue equipment they'd developed for exactly this type of situation. Lieutenant Sarah Park, her radiation suit showing the wear of dozens of similar missions back on Earth, led the first team of 5 toward the facility's compromised sectors. Remember, Elena's voice came through their suit comms as they approached the first containment barrier. Most of these species have never experienced radiation exposure. They'll be panicked, confused. Some may be physically incapacitated. Standard rescue protocols apply. The next 40 minutes became a blur of activity. Human teams moved methodically through radiation-flooded corridors that would have killed any other rescue workers instantly. They found researchers huddled in sealed offices, trapped in laboratories, some already unconscious from exposure. The station's medical bay quickly filled with survivors, while xenobiologists struggled to treat radiation exposure in species that had never evolved any natural defenses against it. Elena coordinated from the emergency center, watching as the number of rescued survivors climbed steadily. Each successful extraction was a testament to humanity's unique capabilities, but also a reminder of how different they were from the rest of galactic society. The final group of survivors included a young crystalline researcher who had sealed herself in a radiation-proof sample vault. As Lieutenant Park carried her to safety, the researcher's translation crystal vibrated with a question that would be repeated across the galaxy in the coming days. Why would you risk yourselves for us? Park's response, recorded by the station's emergency systems and later broadcast throughout the assembly, was simple. Because we could. Because you needed help. That's all the reason we ever need. In the aftermath, as medical teams worked to treat the survivors and engineering crews began the long process of containing the disaster, Elena found herself again facing the Assembly's Emergency Council. But the atmosphere had changed. The fear and suspicion that had tinted their earlier interactions had been replaced by something new. Respect, tinged with awe. Your people acted without hesitation. High Chancellor Zixix observed, their crystalline form emanating patterns of deep appreciation. You risk your lives on the mere possibility of saving others. Elena thought of Earth's long history of disaster response, of humans rushing into danger to save strangers. It's what we do, she replied simply. It's who we are. Minister Ven's form rippled with what the translators interpreted as emotional intensity. Perhaps, they said slowly, we have been looking at your species' radiation resistance from the wrong perspective. We saw it as a potential threat, a weapon. But today has shown us its true nature, a gift, meant to be shared. The rescue at Helios would later be marked as a turning point in human-galactic relations. It was the day that humanity's unique adaptation ceased to be seen as a curiosity or a danger and began to be recognized as what it truly was, a bridge between worlds, a means of helping those who had never evolved to face the harsh realities of a radiation-filled universe. As Elena filed her report to Earth that evening, she couldn't help but reflect on the irony. The very thing that had initially caused the Assembly to fear humanity had become the key to their acceptance. Sometimes, she mused, the greatest strengths could emerge from what others perceived as the strangest differences. The grand laboratory of xenobiology on Europa Station had never seen such activity in its 300 years of operation. Dr. Maya Patel stood at the center of a holographic display that filled the massive chamber, surrounded by some of the galaxy's most brilliant scientific minds. The three-dimensional image of human DNA rotated slowly, its unique repair mechanisms highlighted in pulsing colors that reflected off the environmental suits and containment bubbles of the assembled researchers. The key isn't just in the repair mechanisms themselves, Maya explained, gesturing to a particular sequence that had captured the attention of every xenobiologist in the assembly. It's in how they evolved. Each catastrophic event in Earth's history left its mark, creating layer upon layer of redundant systems. Professor Still, their crystalline form arranged in what Maya had learned to recognize as intense scientific curiosity, moved closer to examine the display. Fascinating. Your species didn't just survive these events. You incorporated their challenges into your very genetic structure. Maya nodded, remembering her own amazement when they'd first begun comparing human DNA with that of other spacefaring species. We found that what we considered normal background radiation on Earth would be lethal to most other forms of life. Our cells don't just repair radiation damage. They expect it, prepare for it, and in some cases, even utilize it. The hologram shifted to show a time-lapse of human cells repairing radiation damage. The assembled scientists watched in stunned silence as the cellular mechanisms performed their dance of reconstruction, efficiently managing what would be catastrophic damage to any other known species. But the most surprising discovery, Maya continued, came when we began studying the long-term effects of radiation exposure on human populations. She gestured, and the display changed to show data from multiple generations of humans living in high radiation environments. We found evidence of ongoing adaptation. We're not just resistant, we're still evolving. The announcement sent ripples of excitement through the chamber. Dr. Veclara, a leading geneticist from the Void Worlds, moved their hovering platform closer. Are you suggesting that human radiation resistance could be transferable? Maya took a deep breath. This was the moment she'd been both anticipating and dreading. Theoretically, yes. Our preliminary research suggests that with proper genetic modification, some aspects of our radiation repair mechanisms could be adapted for other species. The chamber erupted in a chaos of translated exclamations and questions. High above the scientific discussion, observation platforms filled with diplomatic representatives watched with growing concern. The implications were staggering and potentially threatening to the existing galactic order. Dr. Patel called out Professor Enkstill, their crystalline form vibrating with intensity. The ethical implications alone are precisely why we're presenting this research openly. Maya interrupted firmly. Earth has learned harsh lessons about the dangers of restricted scientific knowledge. We believe that understanding these mechanisms is crucial for all spacefaring species. The hologram shifted again, showing the devastating effects of radiation on conventional alien cellular structures. But this isn't just about sharing our resistance. By studying how our cells handle radiation, we're discovering new approaches to protection and repair that could benefit everyone, even without direct genetic modification. As the implications sank in, Maya could see the shift in the chamber's atmosphere. Fear began to give way to possibility. The Helios incident had proved humans could save lives in radiation crises, but this could change everything. We propose, Maya continued, her voice steady, establishing the Joint Research Initiative. Every species brings their own unique perspectives and abilities. Together, we might find solutions none of us could discover alone. Dr. Veclera's translation crystal pulsed with what Maya had learned to recognize as excitement. The applications extend far beyond emergency response. Think of the possibilities for space exploration, for colonizing systems we previously thought uninhabitable. Precisely, Maya agreed. But more importantly, think of the worlds we could help heal, the contaminated planets we could reclaim, the dead zones we could bring back to life. As the scientific discussion evolved into concrete planning, Maya noticed Commander Elena Rodriguez watching from one of the diplomatic observation platforms. The commander gave her a subtle nod of approval. They both knew that this moment, this sharing of humanity's most unique adaptation, would reshape their species' place in the galaxy. Later that evening, as Maya reviewed the day's recordings, Professor Enkstill visited her private lab. Their crystalline form had shifted into what she recognized as their most formal configuration. "Your species continues to surprise us," they said, their translation crystal resonating softly. "First with your physical capabilities, then with your willingness to risk yourselves for others, and now with your openness in sharing such valuable scientific knowledge." Maya smiled, thinking of the long debates back on Earth about how much to reveal. "Knowledge grows by being shared," she replied, quoting one of her old professors. "Besides, we're all in this together now. The universe is vast and often hostile. We'll do better facing it as allies than as rivals." The professor's form sparkled with what might have been amusement. "Indeed, though I suspect some members of the assembly will take longer to accept that view than others. They'll come around," Maya said confidently, turning back to her work. "After all, the evidence is right here in our DNA. Adaptation isn't just about survival. It's about finding new ways to thrive together." The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Assembly had never felt more divided. Ambassador Marcus Chen watched from Earth's podium as delegations from across the galaxy argued about humanity's growing influence in radiation-related matters. The Chamber's sophisticated environmental systems struggled to maintain optimal conditions as species from every corner of known space grew increasingly agitated. The humans cannot be allowed unrestricted access to contaminated zones. The representative from the Silicon Confederation's crystalline form pulsed with aggressive patterns. Their biological advantage in these areas gives them disproportionate control over valuable resources. Marcus maintained his diplomatic composure, though internally he sighed. 3 months of successful radiation cleanup operations, dozens of saved lives, and still some species saw only threats. Commander Rodriguez and Dr. Patel sat beside him, their presence a reminder of how far they'd come, and how far they had yet to go. "Honored representatives," Marcus began, his words flowing through translation crystals across the chamber. Let me remind the Assembly that every cleanup operation has been conducted under full oversight. Every recovered artifact, every salvaged resource has been properly documented and distributed according to Assembly protocols. That is not the point. The Void Dweller representative's environment suit vented excess gas and agitation. Your species alone can safely access these zones. This creates an inherent imbalance of power. Before Marcus could respond, Minister Ven's gelatinous form rippled with urgent patterns. May I remind the Assembly that just last week, a human team sacrificed their own safety to rescue a Void Dweller research vessel from a radiation storm. They asked for nothing in return. The chamber hummed with murmured translations and side conversations. Marcus caught Elena's slight smile. They'd been expecting this confrontation ever since the successful test of Dr. Patel's radiation protection protocols. Perhaps, Marcus suggested, his voice carrying the weight of careful consideration, we're approaching this from the wrong direction. Our radiation resistance isn't about power, it's about responsibility. We view it as an obligation to help. High Chancellor Zixix's crystalline form shifted into what Marcus had learned to recognize as a diplomatic stance. Noble words, Ambassador. But surely you understand why some members of the Assembly are concerned. Your species possesses an ability that fundamentally alters the balance of power in certain situations. With all due respect, Chancellor, Dr. Petal spoke up, her voice clear and confident. That's precisely why we've been so open with our research. The protection protocols we're developing could eventually allow other species to safely operate in radiation zones. The chamber erupted again, this time with a mix of hope and skepticism. Marcus noticed several of the previously hostile delegations showing signs of interest. And who would control these protocols? Demanded the Silicon Confederation representative. Who would decide which species receives such capabilities? The Assembly would, Marcus replied firmly, just as it oversees all major technological sharing initiatives. We're not seeking to monopolize radiation zones, we're trying to make them accessible to everyone. A new voice cut through the debate. Ambassador Elxterra of the Stellar Commons, their energy form flickering with what Marcus recognized as diplomatic amusement. It seems to me that we're witnessing a remarkable irony. We initially feared humans because of their radiation resistance, yet now some fear them because they're willing to share it. The observation sent a ripple of electromagnetic acknowledgement through the chamber. Marcus seized the moment. Ambassador Elxterra raises an excellent point. Every species here has unique abilities or technologies that could be seen as threatening. What matters is how we choose to use them. He gestured to the holographic display showing the successful cleanup operations. In 3 months, joint human-alien teams have made more progress in rehabilitating radiation-contaminated zones than the Assembly managed in the previous decade. Not because humans are superior, but because we're working together. And what guarantee do we have? The Silicon Confederation representative pressed that this cooperation will continue, that humans won't eventually use their advantage to claim these zones for themselves. Elena stood, her commander's uniform carrying the weight of her experiences. You have the same guarantee we all rely on in this Assembly, the knowledge that we achieve more together than apart. We've seen it in every cleanup operation, every rescue mission, every research breakthrough. Dr. Patil activated a new holographic display, showing the latest results from the protection protocol trials. Look at these results. The radiation resistance protocols are already showing promise for 3 different species. Within a year, the human advantage in radiation zones could be shared technology rather than a biological quirk. The chamber fell into contemplative silence as the implications sank in. Marcus watched as various delegations consulted with their governments back home, their communication devices creating a subtle backdrop of encrypted transmissions. Finally, High Chancellor Zixix spoke again. The Assembly recognizes that humanity's handling of their unique capability has been admirable. Perhaps instead of restricting human access to radiation zones, we should focus on accelerating the development of these protection protocols. The proposal gained immediate support from multiple delegations. Marcus exchanged glances with Elena and Maya. This was the opening they'd hoped for. Earth would be honored to expand our research cooperation, Marcus offered. We propose establishing a joint oversight committee for radiation zone operations, with representation from all interested species. Additionally, we'll provide full access to our radiation resistance research data to any assembly member willing to share their own relevant technologies. As the chamber erupted in productive discussion, Ambassador Uxterra's energy form pulsed with what might have been approval. Remarkable, they observed quietly to Marcus. You've managed to transform a potential diplomatic crisis into an opportunity for unprecedented cooperation. Marcus watched as former adversaries began discussing the logistics of joint operations. That's the thing about radiation, he replied with a slight smile. It doesn't care about species or politics. Neither should our response to it. 1 year after the historic Galactic Assembly debates, the dead world of Proxima B shimmered with new life. Commander Elena Rodriguez stood at the viewport of the research station, watching teams of humans and aliens working together on the planet's surface. Thanks to Dr. Patel's protection protocols, species that once feared radiation could now work alongside humans in the restoration efforts. Remarkable progress, Minister Venn observed, their gelatinous form reflecting the red light of Proxima Centauri. 6 months ago, this was a radiation-blasted wasteland. Now look at it. Elena smiled, remembering the skepticism they faced when proposing this project. The site below proved how far they'd come. Crystalline researchers worked alongside human scientists, their environmental suits enhanced with radiation shielding technology derived from human DNA. Void Dweller excavation teams used modified versions of their vacuum-adapted technology to clear contaminated soil. Even the Silicon Confederation, once their strongest opposition, had contributed innovative radiation absorption techniques. Dr. Patel's latest report just came in, Ambassador Chen said, joining them at the viewport. The radiation levels in Zone 3 have dropped another 15%. The bacterial seeding is taking hold faster than projected. Through the viewport, they could see the distinct boundary between the restored and untreated areas, a literal line between death and rebirth. Teams of workers moved methodically across this frontier, each species contributing their unique abilities to the restoration effort. To think, Minister Venn mused, a year ago, some members of the Assembly wanted to quarantine your species. Now we're seeing the birth of entire new fields of science based on your biological adaptations. Elena watched as a group of Silicon Confederation crystals interfaced with the soil, their structure perfectly adapted to detect and neutralize radioactive particles. It was never about just us, she said. Every species here has something unique to contribute. We just needed to find the right way to work together. The station's communication system chimed, and Dr. Maya Patel's hologram materialized in their midst. Her excitement was palpable even through the projection. Commander, Minister, Ambassador, you need to see this. We've just completed the latest genetic surveys of the restoration zone. The air filled with complex holographic data as Maya shared her findings. The radiation-resistant bacteria we seeded aren't just surviving, they're thriving. And they're showing signs of incorporating genetic material from multiple species contributions. It's like the planet itself is learning from our cooperation. Minister Venn's form rippled with scientific excitement, a synthetic evolutionary process accelerated by the combined expertise of a dozen species. Unprecedented. There's more, Maya continued. The protection protocols we developed, they're showing unexpected benefits. The crystalline researchers are reporting increased efficiency in their natural radiation processing. The Void Dwellers have adapted our shielding techniques to improve their deep space capabilities. We're not just sharing technology. We're evolving together. Elena remembered the fear in the assembly chamber when humanity's radiation resistance was first discovered. Now that same trait was helping to forge connections between species that had previously seen each other only as competitors or threats. High Chancellor Zixix is requesting permission to dock, the station's AI announced. They wished to personally inspect the restoration progress. As they prepared to receive the Chancellor, Alina caught glimpses of other projects on the monitors around them. Joint human-alien teams rehabilitating old reactor sites on distant worlds, research groups studying the applications of radiation-resistant genetics in space travel, education programs teaching the next generation of multiple species how to work together in hostile environments. The Chancellor's arrival brought news that would once again reshape their understanding of possibility. The Assembly has approved the establishment of the Interspecies Radiation Response Force. They announced, their crystalline form gleaming with formal patterns. All member species will contribute their unique abilities and technologies. Humanity's radiation resistance was the catalyst, but the force will represent the combined strengths of our entire community. Later that evening, as the red dwarf sun cast long shadows across the restored zones of Proxima b, Alina found herself in the station's observation dome with Maya and Marcus. Below them, the lights of the research bases twinkled like stars on the planet's surface, beacons of life on a world that had been considered dead. "You know what's truly extraordinary," Maya said, looking out at their shared achievement. "It's not just that we found a way to survive in these hostile environments. It's that we found a way to help others do the same." Marcus nodded, his diplomatic experience giving weight to his words. "That's always been humanity's real strength. Not that we can endure radiation, but that we can teach, learn, and adapt. Every species out there has something remarkable about them. We just help them see how those differences could bring them together." Alina watched as a new shift of workers headed out to continue the restoration work. Human shapes moved alongside crystalline forms and floating environment suits, each bringing their own strengths to the task. In the distance, a green line crept across the planet's surface, life returning to a dead world, made possible not by any one species' ability, but by all of them working together. "So what's next?" Maya asked, her scientist's curiosity evident in her voice. Alina smiled, thinking of the countless dead worlds waiting to be restored, the mysteries of radiation resistance still to be understood, and the endless possibilities that lay in combining the unique strengths of different species. "Now," she said, "we keep exploring, keep learning, keep adapting. Together." Above them, the stars beckoned, no longer barriers between species, but bridges waiting to be built. Humanity's radiation resistance had opened the door, but it was their willingness to share, to cooperate, and to imagine a better future that had truly changed the galaxy. The next chapter in their shared story was just beginning.